So today we have a very, very interesting topic, but we're going to try to have fun with it. You know, when I saw the topic, Innovating Investments, Mobilization, and then I saw the bios of the speakers or the panelists, you know, the first thing that caught me was that it had representation from all the future, or actually, should I say the now economies, right? So the economies that are the future of the world. We have Vishal, who is going to be here. Oh, there he is. Who is, you know, Southern Asia. We have South America being represented here by Vivian. No? We have the Caribbeans being represented by David. And we have Africa being represented by Edna. And of course, myself, the moderator, as I'm sure you can tell. So that sort of gives a sense of, you know, to understand what local domestic mobilization is like in these countries, right? How do you get domestic capital? How do you get capital into these parts of the country, or the world, I should say? Looking at these are where the next great ideas are going to come from. So hopefully today, this is maybe the least you're going to hear from me. Our panelists who have a broad representation from the continent will give us a good insights as to what's going on in their countries and their continents, what they've done from a you know, being a practitioner, because I believe Bashar is actually a practitioner. He's a founder, and we have a bank here, and we also have VC and angel investing, you know, representation. So what's excellent about that is you're going to get a sense of what's happening in these countries from practicing and also from investing, both from a banking perspective and from the venture capital perspective. So I'm going to let my panelists introduce themselves when they jump on the first question, but I'm going to throw the first question out, and I'm going to allow South America be the first person to jump on this question. So I'd like to understand, Viviana, what are the most significant barriers, right? Because when you look at the statistics, when you look at the numbers, you know, most of the countries that we represent today are really on the lower end of receiving international investment, which means we have to look at catalytic funding within our own borders of our countries and our continent. But what do you say are the significant barriers to mobilization of capital in your region?
Well, good morning. Thank you all for being here. Very happy to learn from my fellow panelists. I'm Viviana Angulo. I'm Bolivian. I was born in a city called La Paz, raised in another city, and lived in 6 other countries. I came back to Bolivia to start the first accelerator program 7 years ago, and since then we've mobilized different initiatives, starting the first, I was the president and founder of the VC Association of Bolivia. Very happy to let you know that the Venture Capital Association is still running, and it's another woman that took over as well. I've started 3 national programs where we help over 900 entrepreneurs a year. At this point, I'm in a position where I can tell you that I'm very thankful of what I've been able to do in my own country. I created my most worth job in my loved country. But then reality hits. The last 7 years has been a very, very turbulent time in politics and economics in my country. You talk about barriers. I want to maybe divide those barriers in 2 segments. First, the obvious barriers, which are economical barriers, where you have macroeconomic instability at low reserves, a country with foreign exchange scarcity. There are no dollars right now. You cannot pay in dollars or any type of internal or external transactions in dollars. Inflation, discouragement in investment, regulatory inefficiencies. That's why 76% of the startups that would be able to raise investments, they move abroad in order to do so. That means that talent is moving out of the country as well. Thin pipeline of fund managers, because we just started. We just started learning from our fellow countries. Argentina and many other countries have helped us learn how to develop venture capital in the past 3 years. But we moved fast in this sense. We have, like I said, two new funds, Babasu, and another one funded by an entrepreneur, which means that the cycle is running. The association, the Venture Capital Association, is very well delved into the LATAM venture capital activity. And then we have, I would say, another type of barrier, which is a mental barrier. When you see talent in your country, but you persistently see that it's not having the right tools, you get frustrated. And I think that frustration mentally, like we recently, there is a very hot topic, how to support entrepreneurs, right? Mentally and emotionally. How do you support the whole ecosystem with more tools? And I think this is a topic that we've been hearing in the conference, that we should double click on how to give tools to those that we are maximizing what the situation is in our own countries.
Thank you. So we're beginning to hear some of the pain points, right, of being in South America. But being in Nigeria, you're basically saying exactly what's happening in my country to some extent. And this just leads me to go to Bashar. I hadn't planned on it, but when you're talking about entrepreneurial pain, I just have to go to the entrepreneur on the panel. If you can draw insights, I know that you do a service called Health at Home, and yeah. So can you speak to how some of these barriers affects being a founder in South Asia?
Thank you, Oswald, and good morning, everyone. I just landed last night, midnight, literally, and I made a point that I came in here to make a point on what really a developing country's economy and marketplace and startup and investments looks like. And I, as an entrepreneur, thank you for looking at it from that perspective. And my connection with Nepal Angels and actually in South Asian economy, how the angel networks work, is basically born out of a network of this institution. And I have a great admiration for a father of African Angel Network, Tommy Davis. And I happened to come to Istanbul conference. Then I was romantic. I did a panel. I got to this exposure. The fanfare was pretty big. Erdogan spoke and everything was there. The second one I kind of soaked in Bahrain. I got to meet Tommy. And I met my mentor now, Padmaja. And I realized that ecosystem is something that was not there in Nepal as a gelled. And when you think about ecosystem, you really think about from the prospect that we all are part of now, and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to soak in. So that was in Manama, that actually by the river, seaside, actually I was talking to Tommy and I said, hey, listen, Tommy, one thing I struggled in my entrepreneurial career is basically raising a fund, because there was no risk finance category which would help me. And I said, why don't you help me? And he said, yes, why don't I help you? And I went back and I started mobilizing a concept called Nepal Angels Network. And it was something crude. And everybody, actually I failed this time creating that platform, but I will not give up because I know what is true. The truth is, you need to mobilize community and you need to sow the seed for what the Angel Network is not about scale, is actually about cultivation. It's not about the harvest, it's about that what you have showed as a product. So for me, philosophically, these guys are a gigantic guys who actually I just got an opportunity to be mentored by. And Padmaja went back to India, and our is South Asia. So connecting dot, I started working on it, I rallied some friend, build up some momentum. Then I got back to I got back to Tommy, and he said, like, when it's too far. And then first few emails, it was okay. Then I realized, okay, we need to pull in someone from local. So I reached out to Indian Angel Network, and today I'm coming in representing South Asia because of her. And it's not because of Nepal Angels, because what I did was because I knew about ecosystem building, what LATAM does it now. So I called her up and said, hey, listen, I cannot do it alone. I don't know. I mean, I can speak a little bit different, but I don't know anything about it. Why don't you mentor me? And I got in a class. He said, good. Then I said, why don't you build a network of Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and kind of cultivate that India, what it has done. They've done phenomenal. There's hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in pipeline, a lot of things going on IPO, a lot of things done by the ecosystem, building capacity by what Indian Angel does. It's a global champion. So I said, okay, we'll take your subsidiary kind of thing, and we start building. So coming to the point, what entrepreneur pain point was, it took me around 5 to 7 years to raise my first fund. So if you don't have an angel, you don't have anything beyond your friends and family cycle. So basically, if you don't have that ecosystem, you're not actually building an ecosystem for ideas. So I told this as a fundamental philosophy where we need to work. And actually it is working, because once I said we launched Nepal Angel Network, and I did a little bit of a social media thing. So small community, people got triggered. Oh, this guy can do everything and he goes everywhere. Why don't we do it? So suddenly what happened? That ecosystem started becoming egoistic. They started investing, calling the names, saying we are also investors. So I said, like, my job is done. I triggered or instigated the change. And that's what brings me here. Thank you very much. That's the story.
Excellent. Yeah. Please clap. So I always shake my head at angel investors. Being one as well, we're mad people. You put that first faith dollar down on ideas. It's not your cousin, it's not your brother, isn't the idea and the person you're betting on. But one thing that you said, amongst many things that you said that were fantastic, was the idea of mobilizing community. I tell people a lot of times it's not really about the money, but it's almost about everything else around supporting the entrepreneur. Mobilizing the community, cultivation, you may have not heard yourself say, but you said it. Basically cultivating the idea, cultivating the environment through policy, and cultivating the growth of the entrepreneur. So I think this is where I'll go back to David, and I've got this thing where I have to spin this way to the other side, and then cross my legs again. David, you're all about community. I took a peek at what you're doing, and so I see that you're actually mobilizing finance through a community approach, and with a focus, basically taking the whole community and focusing it on a region. I should allow you to speak, right? So, David, taking that approach of community, can you also give us some sense of the barriers that you have experienced on your journey?
No, thank you for the introduction. Happy to be here on this panel and representing the Caribbean in particular. David Mullings, the founder, chairman, CEO of Blue Moho Holdings, and we created a special purpose vehicle, Blue Moho Capital, that was focused on taking capital from the Caribbean diaspora into the Caribbean itself. We felt that it was easier to raise money from people who essentially are 1 foot bars to step over, not 7 foot bars to jump over, as Warren Buffett would say. So they don't have this resort distort. They're not thinking of the Caribbean as just sun, sea, and sand. They understand that the opportunity is there. They already know the region, know the culture, know the companies in most cases, but they don't have an easy way to invest back home. So we have a few pain points we have to overcome though, right? The first one is that there's a trust deficit. Once you move away from a developing country, usually to a developed market, US, Canada, UK, where things run a little bit more efficiently, you tend to look back home and say, well, I don't know if I want to put money in there. How do I ensure I get a return? What are the rules and regulations around that? So that's first one is we have to overcome that trust deficit, right? People want, in our opinion, a simple way that is audited, regulated, and transparent to invest into these markets, especially if they're first or second generation, where they actually don't know what the legal system looks like. So that was number one. The second problem we have, though, is what do you invest in if the ecosystem doesn't exist? In the Caribbean, yes, we have a lot of startups, we have a lot of incubators, we have a lot of accelerators, and they tend to duplicate each other's work. So whether we have the Branson Center of Entrepreneurship Caribbean, but then we have other things that are the same. They're not building on top of each other. And we supposedly have an angel investor group, but then they require that you have a full board of directors and audited financials every 3 months. I don't know any startup in the United States that has audited financials every 3 months. So they're private equity investors, not angel investors. We had launched a venture capital association in Jamaica, for example. You look in Barbados, you have Future Barbados, which thankfully has come out of the policy side. So if you don't have regulators and policymakers to support entrepreneurship, then we're going to have problems. Rules need to change. But the single biggest issue we have, I'm sure we've all heard it in here, that entrepreneurs are over-mentored and underfunded, right? Well, that's the biggest problem we have in the Caribbean, is we have a cultural issue. We start by looking at failure as a badge of shame, not a badge of honor. So here in the United States, where my brother and I did our first startup through the Launchpad at University of Miami in 2001, and we met with an angel investor that they put us in touch with. And I never forgot, Leonard asked us, how many startups have you tried before? And we said, no, this is the first one. He says, oh, well, I'm not writing a check. And I was like, what? And he says, no, it's a good idea, but if you haven't failed yet, it means this is the one you're going to fail at, and you're going to lose my money. Come back after you failed twice. Once experience. We go to Jamaica instead, and they say, okay, how many things have you tried? And we say, well, we failed twice. Oh, well, I don't want to put money in there. So in the Caribbean, and I think there are certain cultures that are like that. If you fail, they look at you as you're a scammer, or you've stole the money, or you didn't do what you said you're going to do. And we need to change that. As he said, we talk about that mental block. We have to be willing to allow someone to fail, learn from it, pass it on to the rest of us, and then support them again. Otherwise, it depends on the friends, family, and fools, the 3 Fs. And those aren't the ones we're going to raise money from the scale. So we think we have an interested way to approach the next phase. So we are focused on growth equity. I am a Warren Buffett guy, so I'm investing in public equities, private equity, private credit, and we're doing some real estate. We do not do startups from our balance sheet. So we've created a charitable foundation here in the US. Anybody can put money into it. We are taking cash from our profits to put into the foundation. The foundation can do non-dilutive capital, so we can do a grant. We just did our first pitch competition in Jamaica. And then the second thing, we can invest for profit through the non-profit. And if the company works out, the money goes back to the pool to help everyone. If it fails, I don't cry, because I got a tax deduction anyway. I think for me, it's going to be the safest way, because if we don't provide that early stage capital, one, is not going to be there, and number two, we won't have any leads for the growth equity side. Somebody needs to plant those seeds for us to come in and water the tree.
It's got me nodding my head. So we've heard some barriers. We've heard about the approach to taking community to actually invest back home, and the vehicle. I think it's now we speak to the banker, right? To get a sense of what do you believe, or what do you see as the vehicle for local versus international mobilization of resources for startups in our regions. I mean, we basically have already heard that we have the same problems. I'm sure you were nodding when you heard the problems to the left of myself. So what do you think from a bank perspective are some of the vehicles that you believe can help us, address these problems?
Thanks. So my name is Edna Monse, and I'm from African Bank. African Bank was started in the hardest of times in South Africa. It was during apartheid. And really, it was a couple of weeks after the Rivonia trial of Nelson Mandela and his compatriots, when he was sentenced then to Robben Island. So if you can really imagine that time, it was a time of challenge, of impossibility, so to speak. And so the birth of African Bank, it was conceptualized in 1964, but really took us more than 10 years before we opened our first doors for the first branch. And we had so many different hurdles, similar to many entrepreneurs, some even give up along the way. The reason why the bank was started still is very valid and exists today. It's to address some of the challenges that, my fellow panelists have really spoken to. We face those challenges today, and that says something, because this year, for example, African Bank turns 50 years old, and yet it's still addressing those same challenges. We are finding ourselves asking questions of one another within the bank as colleagues, but also reaching out to other players in the market who can be able to help us to address some of these questions, because as a banker, there's things that we don't quite know, and that others are able to do better than us. And so if we want to sit in our high towers and not really engage with everybody, we're not going to solve the problems of our founding. And so we've got a really great partner, one of the ecosystem players in 22 on Sloan. So they are the headquarters of Gen Africa. And they're an implementation partner that has really helped us to walk along the way. Many of the African bankers, so our colleagues as well, are always engaging with entrepreneurs because we're a bank founded by entrepreneurs and we're very entrepreneurial in our address. So we also look at research and data to figure out how do we, within the parameters of the law of regulation, find ways to be able to innovate in terms of funding and investing in some of these micro, small, and medium enterprises. What we found is that funding itself is not the only issue. And we only found that, of course, after failing a couple of times. Funding is but part of the issue. So therefore, we've set ourselves up as an entrepreneurial support organization as well. So we are both a bank and also an ESO. So for example, the outfit that I'm wearing comes from one of the entities that went through our program. And it is, on the back of that we were able to then work with them and put our money where our mouth is and invest and assist them such that they could now be able to provide uniforms for all African bank colleagues. So, which is what I'm wearing today, is the uniform that was designed by Nkosi. It's not always easy because at times people think that once they've been in business for 10 years or so, they know it, they get it. But there are challenges that protect organizations such as ourselves from being reckless lenders because we're not using our own money, we're using other people's money. That's the crux of banking. And so we need to find ways to de-risk the very entities that we're going to be investing in. And part of the de-risking is that, as an entrepreneur, are you willing to be able to go through some of these programs so that we can close some of the gaps that you don't yet know that you've got? Secondly is how do we start to leverage alternate data that is going to be able to assist us in terms of your everyday transactions as a business organization, So instead of looking only at your credit rating or your credit score, how do we actually look at your performance as an entity and your behavior, the cash flow and so forth? Instead of looking only at collateral, how do we then look at other asset classes that you, perhaps as the entrepreneur yourself, as the founder, could be able to put on the table, or that you're not aware is an asset necessarily within the business? So how do we assist you to be able to classify those, and we can then start to look at them as different asset classes? That then opens up the opportunity for you to engage with the bank from a normal business and commercial perspective. But of course, we also do provide grants, and we provide guarantees and so forth, as I said, as an ESO and both a bank. But the crux of the challenge for us has really been how do we de-risk such that investment is possible within the confines of regulation, which is global regulation, by the way, about reckless lending, credit analysis and assessments and so forth. So that's really part of the challenge that we are making sure we're tackling head on.
All right. So busy nodding, I forgot about the mic. So Edna said something that I've been telling people myself, which is funding is only just part of the issue. Funding, in my perspective, is just the water that waters the idea. What about the soil, right? The soil and the environment to which the idea is being planted in. And I think that's what the primary issue you will find in most of emerging economies. But hey, you didn't come to listen to me. Let's let the panelists speak to it. So we almost run out of time, and I want to leave opportunity for questions. But what I would do is I'll allow each panelist, because we've talked about problems, and we talked about a bit of community and a vehicle, but I'll allow you 2 minutes each to sort of speak to solutions, right? I mean, some of you already done. I'll start with you, Vivian, because I think you more so took the early stab at speaking to the problems and not so much getting a chance to speak to the solution. So I'll allow you start to speak to what you believe is the solution around a fantastic topic, but you could speak beyond as to, fund is not really all of the problem, but essentially is a big part of it.
Yes, I think a country needs to do an introspection and see where are those pockets where entrepreneurial ideas and the solutions can be real and practice and become arenas for the world to practice in. For example, in Bolivia, we're very near the Amazon forest, and every year we're losing part of the Amazon. So everything that could be tested in terms of environment, minery, gas. So if we could, as a country, put together where we need the world to be looking at us as a country for solutions, or to be an arena for those solutions, that would, with a clear message for the world, that's one thing. The other thing is the corporate sector. Pista 8 started with a hybrid model, very much based on corporate collaboration. So we have entrepreneurs working with startups and educating themselves to develop those projects. That's cross-pollination. It's really narrow the distance between the corporate sector in Bolivia and the startups. So, and it's been a 7-year process. So we are very close to the corporate sector. The corporate sector is very much aware of how entrepreneurs are needed in the country. And I think that's a battle we've won. Third, we have a lot of female founders. We've turned the data on 20% of the founders when we started to 87% of the teams have one or more women in their teams. So we are a country that's listening to the women talent. But then how do we show the outcomes, and how do we design that scenario of a very thriving ecosystem to politics? And how do we really have the legislation needed or the support needed? For example, the grants that are provided in Bolivia go to the bottom of the pyramid, always, most of the time. So we need to change also who the subjects of those grants and the objective of those grants are, having a lot more visibility in the middle sector, in the sector that, yes, it's educated, but it's not privileged. I don't like that word when it's used on the entrepreneurial ecosystem, because we know we're not privileged. We really work hard on whatever we are seeking and developing from scratch, and even in the most difficult ecosystems.
Edna, you want to go next?
Thanks. I mean, when I reflect on what some of the speakers have also said, and some of the work that we've done as African Bank, I think we need to have more research, but not just research for the sake of research, but research that's actually going to help us to reshape the reality that entrepreneurs are facing today. Some of the research that we've used as well, we found that is quite outdated, but we've recently partnered with an organization to do a research study on micro enterprises. So, and we found that on micro, small and medium enterprises actually, and we found that 85% of those entities within that categorization of what I think some in the globe refer to as SMMEs, more than 85% of them in our country make around $55,000 or less, but they actually contribute over 85% of those looking for funding, and also those who are job creators. However, they are also the most underserved. It's quite a conundrum. I think we need more public-private partnerships, because most definitely this is not something that can be solved by policymakers alone. Corporate has to come to the party. We also have to be able to create avenues for market access, because you can fund, but if you don't have the market to provide and you don't have the demand, then the funding really doesn't return any you don't get any ROI. So we need to also open opportunities for investment and access to market. We also need to find new ways and new paths for collaboration in creating these ecosystems. Let's learn from one another. Let's collaborate. Let's leverage each of our strengths, because we can't do it alone. You know, from a banking perspective, that's what we know. We know banking. We also understand the constructs of banking and how it at times kind of excludes entrepreneurs and their realities because of the legacy systems that were set up in such a manner. And so how do we use and partner with non-bank financial institutions to be able to collaborate better in that? We also need to figure out, of course, how do we de-risk? That's really a big thing from financial services. But I do believe that the more we collaborate, the more we leverage our ecosystems, then we can definitely be able to co-create a solution that is viable for entrepreneurs.
Right. Collaborate, ecosystem. David?
No, I appreciate that. I love what's been said so far. We took a different approach, and I think everyone in this room has 3 things they can contribute, regardless of whether you're a funder, an ecosystem builder, or an entrepreneur. You have time, talent, and treasure. Those are 3 things we all have. Give one of those to entrepreneurs. Give one of those to the ecosystem, right? Time, talent, or treasure. Some of us don't have the treasure right now. That's fine. But your time, the knowledge you have, the experience you have, the doors you can open is beneficial. Right? Your talent, do you know something about digital marketing, for example, or how they might be able to use AI, or is it governance? So give them some of your time. If you can pull together the treasure, then do it. What we looked at again was using regulations that exist in developed markets. So the US, Canada, UK, all have ways for you to do equity crowdfunding. Right? We all know back in the day, we would jump on Kickstarter, and that's rewards-based crowdfunding. But the Jobs Act changed the way things work in the US. So we focus on creating a vehicle that would pool capital from Caribbean diaspora in the US and friends of the Caribbean, invest in an entity here, it could then invest in the Caribbean. So they're investing through a US entity. We did $10 a share, $500 US minimum. Spent less than $2,000. I spent $1,750 over 30 days last year on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And we got $247,500 committed in 30 days. From less than $2,000. So we knew our audience and they were looking for a way to invest back home. That can be repeated. So we want to share that with as many people as possible. We're going a little further. We're listing it on NASDAQ. So we're listing a public vehicle that allows anyone to buy shares and invest back in the Caribbean because it's regulated, audited, transparent, and now is liquid. We get to overcome those hurdles. You don't have to go all the way to the listing. We have chosen to go that far. But on top of that, I've stopped complaining. I worked in Jamaica, and then I worked here for a hedge fund and in private equity. I don't complain about corporate anymore or companies, right? There was a microfinance company in Jamaica. People were complaining about interest rates, so we bought a stake. We bought a 19.9% stake, and I joined the board. And then we lent them money at a much lower interest rate than they were getting in Jamaica, and we mandated they pass on the lower interest rate to the borrowers. So I shouldn't lend you at 10 or 12%, and you lend it at 50%. That's crazy. You lend it at less than 20. So we just provided capital to them. The same way right now, we're actually doing a deal to buy a regulated financial firm in Jamaica that allows us into the Caribbean. We bought shares in public companies. We'll join the board of 2 of them, and we'll force them to do business with the SMEs and stop leaving them out. I'm at the point where we take diaspora capital, buy into the business, get on the board and change them. We need to be activist investors back home and get them to emancipate themselves from that mental slavery that they should only deal with the biggest and the Fortune 500 type companies out there. So I think the diaspora has more money than we realize. Pool it and go home and make some change.
All right. Yeah, we should. Time, talent, and treasures. I have a lot of time. I do have some talent, and I welcome the treasures. So, this is exciting stuff. I hope you guys are loading up your questions because I must tell you, it's not too often you're going to have these continents basically presented on the panel and basically telling you the truth of what it is to invest in their economies. So I hope you have questions, and I'm going to leave 10 minutes for questions. I have not saved the best for last. I've just saved Bashar for last. That's you. You thought you were off the hook, didn't you?
So that 2-minute thing?
2 minutes. Brother.
Okay.
Tell us the magic.
So I was part of this kind of a discussion in the other side. Today I'm sitting here talking about Nepal Angels, making it sensible and relevant to everyone to listen. And it came out from this kind of auditorium. Just, I have one question to everyone as a participant. Just think about it for 30 seconds. whichever country you guys come from, do you remember any institution which is NPO, not-for-profit organization, which doesn't have any barrier for startups to come and pitch and call themselves a network organization like Angel Network, where there are investors recognized, funders recognized, startups recognized, and ideas are fostered? How many of you come from different countries, have those organizations, or let's say doesn't have that organization, where you can think in a first click that you can go as a no barrier, nothing attached to it? Do you have those kind? So can you raise your hand for the countries that doesn't have it? Higher. Okay, so you got to remember three names. It's Tommy Davis, Padmaja Ruparel, and now my name, okay? So, and you guys can be a change maker in your community, and that's because of the bold decision that you have a capacity to take to make the change in the ecosystem. And that's what we represent. Yesterday I was listening to Tommy and other guys. Today I'm talking about it, and still there are communities who doesn't have access to startups, ideas, investors, doesn't have a recognition platform which is indifferent, which doesn't have biases, which doesn't come from a legacies, which doesn't have anything attached to it. And that is what is an asset in a community that Jane can produce right from these auditoriums. Thank you.
So I open the floor for questions. There's a mic room in the back.
Thank you for this interesting session. And my question is really for David. How did you deal with the trust deficit issues in putting together your diaspora fund?
So I love that. Technically, it's not a fund. And technically, it is an investment holding company. I try to explain the difference. So in 2014, the Jamaica Stock Exchange had me present at their annual conference. And the topic they asked me was, how do we get the diaspora to invest back in Jamaica? Not just send more remittances, right? So a country at the time was doing 2.2 billion US dollars per year in remittances and a population of 2.8 million. So it's a lot of money going back. And I said, why would they ask me? And they said, well, you served on the Diaspora Advisory Board representing Jamaicans in the US. You worked in finance in Jamaica and in the US. Just tell us what it would take for you to write a check. I said, oh, well, that's easy. And I said, we have 5 things to overcome. Number one, we do not trust the government. It doesn't matter who is in charge, which political party. We will not do a diaspora bond like Israel. That's why most countries have never been able to successfully do a diaspora bond. The politicians are either corrupt, as far as we're concerned, we've left. They are corrupt, inefficient, or they run the business into the ground when the government owns it. So it had to be private sector led. That's number one. Number two, has to be run by someone from the diaspora who goes back home more often than those who've moved and never gone back. You need to know who to do business with, who not to do business with, how things really run locally, and how the diaspora now thinks differently. We're not better, we're not smarter, we just think a little bit different because of our lived experience. Number three, partner with a financial institution in the home country known outside the home country. Right? I need to avoid the Bernie Madoffs and the Alan Stanfords in Jamaica, the Cash Pluses and so on. So that was important. That's where the biggest trust problem is. They've invested before and they've been burnt. Even if it was a family member to build a house for them and they come down 5 years later and you only see 3 blocks and they said, wait, well, how's sending all this money? Right? So that's number 3, the trust. Number 4, in my opinion, you needed to have a legal system that they trust. In the Caribbean, unfortunately, we run on CP time, Caribbean people time. And island time don't work. If I sue you, I don't want to wait 10 years. So the legal system is good, right? Very good jurisprudence, British-based, but we don't work on time. So the US, Canada, UK has a better legal system that's more trusted. We domiciled it in the US. So people feel comfortable wiring money to our JP Morgan account, not to some Jamaican bank that, yeah, they've heard of them, but if I sue you, what happens? So that's number 4. And then 5th and final, though, is that the majority of people are not accredited investors, right? So if you go for a fund approach, a PE fund, a VC fund, or a hedge fund, they have to be accredited, and it's only 100 people. They feel left out. We wanted the person with $100 or $1,000 to be able to invest, not just $100,000. So when we go to somebody and say $10 a share, $500 minimum investment, Here's the reporting. We are SEC regulated. It's a qualified offer, and it goes through a platform that's third party. Oh, wow. But there was one piece we didn't know about until we applied. In the United States, we're raising money via equity crowdfunding on a regulated platform. You have the option to purchase insurance. So we were able to say to everybody, when you put your money in there, it is insured. Your principal for that investment is insured via this regulated platform. It costs us 5% of what we raise. So all these people now said, well, I can afford $500. That's a round trip ticket to anywhere in the Caribbean. So I definitely can afford $500 to try it. But on top of that, is insured. I might as well put in more. So our smallest investor did $500. Our largest investor on the platform did $50,000. Just to give you an understanding of the difference. And then we ended up raising money offline. So that is how we started. I knew what I felt was important, and then I found more people who thought the same as me, basically, and then built the audience from there. Now when we get listed, we're not worried about trust. At that point, we are a NASDAQ-listed entity, so the trust deficit gets erased at that point.
Fantastic. Any other questions? Aha.
Thank you. Well, mostly, Edna, you've talked about the risk, the investment. So for all of us to get more capital for our clients or entrepreneurs, we need to offer a better risk-return ratio. So if you can all give one piece of advice to de-risk or portray our entrepreneurs like less risky. I know there's a lot of research trying to do that. Yeah, if you can provide some sort of advice on what points we should be addressing to the risk those entrepreneurs.
Don't miss any payments. Don't miss any payments, even in your personal life. The challenge with how financial services is structured globally, so this is not only South Africa. In South Africa, we are a lot more advanced, which is why we didn't get impacted as much as the rest of the world with some of the global recessions and so forth and the economic crisis from a banking perspective. It's really because, you know, we really have set up our banks very strictly, our regulator. But anywhere in the world, if you miss a payment, just imagine someone looking at you with a side eye, because you're kind of breaking their trust. You're saying that if you cannot pay, if you choose not to pay David, what's to make me think you're going to pay me? David took a chance on you, you burnt him. Why should I take a chance on you when I've got evidence of the fact that you're not trustworthy? So, in as much as we say it's all right to make mistakes, we base our decisions on data. It's at times unfair. And at times, as an entrepreneur, you've got to put in your own money into the entity, right? And in putting your own money into the bank or into the entity, you sometimes forget to pay yourself. So if I can give you a second one. So one is, please don't miss a payment. Because if we can't trust the entity, we look at you as the entrepreneur and say, can we back the jockey? If the jockey is also untrustworthy, it makes it really difficult. So that's one. The second one, and I never said this. So you did not hear it from me. There's no Edna who ever said this. I will deny. You need to pay yourself. If possible, pay yourself first. As entrepreneurs, we pay ourselves last. The reason why you pay yourself is we've got a system. So on your bank statement, you will have, I don't know if, I think all over the world, in fact, it works the same. You will have a part where it says due date if you owe money, right? So to say amount due by whatever on your statement for your credit card of your account, whatever loan you've got. Make sure that at least 36 days, if you can, 36 hours if you can, all right? Prior to the amount due date, you put those funds that you've paid yourself. So if your due date is the 1st of the month, you pay yourself on the 27th of the month. And then on the 28th of the month, you put the money back into the amount due date. So you've paid yourself from the bank. We see the money coming out. That reflects on your statement. 24 hours or so later, you send the money back. It comes out on our books. I never said it. Does that make sense? I never said it. Pay yourself and pay your debt, right?
I'll
So
do a private session on that one.
circulate it. We use data. Help yourself with the data, not to use it against us, but to help you look better when we're analyzing the data. I never said it.
All right. So I'm getting the X signal here. I believe we all agree we need another hour of this.
We all need a special session with her.
Yeah, we need
if
a
you
special
want to
session.
survive as an entrepreneur.
We definitely need a special session on
Yeah.
this. So thank you, everybody, for coming to join us. Thanks to the panelists. And thank you to the audience. Have a good day.